This is HOA Neighbor Wars. She treated my fence line like her personal border. You are going to stop talking over me. That was the first thing Karen White screamed at me, jabbing a laminated rule card toward my face while rain dripped off the brim of her gray bucket hat. The contractor invoice I held did not matter to her, she yelled. Only her checklist mattered. I stood in my own yard, boots sinking into mud, while she waved that card like it was a court order. My fence was not even built yet. The old panels were already hauled away, leaving bare post holes and a sagging string line that marked where the new boundary would go. Karen did not care. She had decided I was in violation before I hammered a single nail. I am a pest control technician in Quebec City, Quebec, and I keep detailed service logs for every job I do. I document everything: timestamps, photos, notes. It is how I stay employed. My company watches attendance like hawks, and one more late arrival ends my probation. So when Karen showed up that morning, blocking my driveway with her sedan and demanding I halt all work, I knew I had to move fast. The Foxglove Falls Design Review Association does not mess around. They micromanage fence styles like it is fine art. Height, color, setback, post spacing, panel texture, everything has a rule, and Karen enforces them like a prosecuting attorney. She held up a stack of printed photos, fanning them out in the drizzle. "These are your materials," she said. Non-compliant. I have documented every single item your contractor unloaded. You do not build to my standard, you pay to my standard. That phrase again. She loved it. I had heard it twice already that week, once in a voicemail and once in a group chat post where she painted me as a neighborhood hazard. I clenched my car key fob tighter, feeling the ridges dig into my palm, and forced myself to stay calm. I needed to get to work. I needed this fence done. And I needed Karen to stop treating my property like her personal enforcement playground. The whole mess started 3 weeks earlier when I pulled the permit to replace my rotting cedar fence. The old one was 20 years past its prime, leaning so badly that a strong wind could knock it flat. I hired a local contractor, got the city permit, checked the recorded plat for my property line, and scheduled the work. Simple. Except the day the contractor showed up to mark the layout, Karen appeared with a tape measure and a clipboard. She informed me that the setback was wrong, the height exceeded HOA limits, and the panel style was not pre-approved. I showed her the permit. She said permits did not override HOA covenants. I showed her the covenant section on fences. She said I was reading it wrong. That was when I realized this was not going to be a normal project. Karen is the HOA vice president, and she has a reputation. Neighbors call her the gatekeeper. She has shut down deck builds, forced repaints, and once made a guy remove a mailbox because the post was 2 inches too tall. The Foxglove Falls Design Review Association loves her because she does their dirty work. They send her out to enforce violations, and she does it with a smile and a laminated rule card she waves around like a badge. I thought if I stayed polite and followed the rules, I would be fine. I was wrong. Karen escalated immediately. The morning after she confronted me in the yard, a post appeared in the neighborhood group chat. It said I was trespassing on an easement, that my contractor was reckless, and that I was creating a safety hazard. She did not name me directly, but everyone knew. The post included a photo of my driveway with the lumber pile visible. Within an hour, 3 neighbors messaged me asking if I was okay, and 2 others posted replies agreeing with Karen. The group chat has 200 members. I felt my stomach drop. This was not just about a fence anymore. This was about my reputation, my credibility, and whether I could live in this neighborhood without being branded a problem. I called my contractor. He said he had seen this before. HOA vice presidents with too much power and too much free time. He told me to document everything. Keep copies of all permits and invoices, and do not engage with her directly unless I had a witness. Good advice, but it did not stop what happened next. 2 days later, I came home from work to find Karen in my yard, alone, measuring the distance from the property line to the nearest post hole. She had a tape measure stretched across the dirt, a notepad in one hand, and her phone on speaker held low with the screen turned away. She was talking to someone, narrating her findings like a detective. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was verifying compliance. I told her she was on my property without permission. She said the covenants gave her inspection rights. I told her that was not true. She snapped a photo of me, said your camera does not matter, my minutes are the truth, and walked away. That phrase stuck in my head. Your camera does not matter, my minutes are the truth. She said it like she believed it. Like her version of events was the only one that counted. I went inside, pulled up my doorbell camera footage, and saved the clip. She had been on my property for 11 minutes, measuring, photographing, and narrating into her phone. I did not know what she was planning, but I knew I needed proof. The next escalation came fast. The HOA sent a certified letter saying I was in violation of setback rules and that work must stop immediately pending a design review hearing. The letter was dated 3 days earlier, but I received it that morning. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. If I did not attend, the HOA would proceed with fines and a potential lien. The letter included a checklist of required documents, permit copies, contractor certifications, and a site survey signed by a licensed surveyor. I had most of it, but the surveyor requirement was new. I called the HOA management company. They said it was standard. I asked why it was not mentioned in the original covenant. They said it was a recent amendment. I asked when it was amended. They said they would get back to me. They never did. I was trying to keep my home insurance stable. The old fence was a liability, and my agent had made it clear that if it fell and damaged a neighbor's property, my rates would spike or I would lose coverage entirely. The HOA was pushing me toward a claim, and they knew it. Every day of delay was another day of risk. I could not afford to wait for a hearing. But I also could not afford to ignore the letter. I was trapped. I called an attorney, a guy I knew from a neighborhood referral list who specialized in HOA disputes. He listened to my story, asked a few questions, and told me the truth. The HOA was overreaching, but fighting them would cost more than the fence. If I wanted to win, I needed to find a mistake they made, something big enough to force them to back down. He said most HOAs crack when you find vendor favoritism, selective enforcement, or procedural violations. He told me to dig into their records, look for patterns, and build a case. Then he quoted me his retainer. I thanked him and hung up. I could not afford a lawyer. I would have to do this myself. The design review hearing was set for a Thursday afternoon at the clubhouse. I had to take time off work, which my supervisor noted with a pointed look and a reminder about probation. I arrived early with a binder full of permits, photos, the recorded plat, and my contractor's invoice showing material specs. The hearing room was a long table with 5 board members on one side and a single chair on the other. Karen sat at the far end, wearing her gray blazer and her bucket hat, even indoors. She had her laminated rule card on the table in front of her, along with a 3-ring binder stuffed with printouts. The board president, an older man named Gerald, opened the meeting by reading the violation notice aloud. Setback noncompliance, unapproved materials, unauthorized work commencement. I started to respond, but Karen cut me off. She said I had ignored multiple warnings, refused to cooperate with inspections, and created a safety hazard. I opened my mouth to correct her, and she raised her voice. "You are going to stop talking over me." The same line from the yard. The board members looked uncomfortable, but no one stopped her. I let her talk. I let her walk through her binder, pointing to photos and measurements, narrating every alleged violation. She talked for 11 minutes straight. When she finished, I asked if I could respond. Gerald nodded. I opened my binder and started with the permit. Issued by the city, approved for the exact specs Karen claimed were non-compliant. I showed the recorded plat. My property line was exactly where my contractor had marked it. I showed the covenant section on fences. The height limit was 6 feet. My fence was 6 feet. Karen interrupted. She said the covenant had been amended and that the new limit was 5.5 feet. I asked for a copy of the amendment. She said it was in the minutes from a board meeting 6 months ago. I asked if the minutes had been distributed to homeowners. She hesitated. Gerald said they had not. That was my opening. I pointed out that an amendment could not be enforced if homeowners were not notified. Gerald looked at Karen. She said notification was not required for minor clarifications. I said a 6-inch height reduction was not a minor clarification. One of the other board members, a woman named Diane, asked if anyone else had been cited for the same issue. Karen said no. Diane asked why. Karen said I was the only one currently building. I asked if that meant selective enforcement. Karen's face went red. She said I was twisting her words. The meeting lasted another 20 minutes. The board voted to table the issue pending clarification of the amendment process. Karen argued, but Gerald shut her down. He said they needed to review the bylaws before proceeding. I walked out feeling cautiously optimistic. I had bought time. But I knew Karen was not done. 2 days later, a vendor I had never heard of knocked on my door. He introduced himself as a fence inspector, said the HOA had sent him to verify compliance, and asked to see my yard. I told him I did not consent to an inspection without notice. He said the HOA had the right to send inspectors. I told him to leave. He took a photo of my front door and walked away. An hour later, another vendor showed up. Same script. I refused again. By the end of the day, I had turned away 4 different vendors, all claiming the HOA had sent them. It was harassment, plain and simple. The HOA was sending vendors to my door without notice to verify compliance and provoke me. I called the management company and demanded an explanation. They said vendors were part of the standard enforcement process. I said sending 4 vendors in one day was not standard. The rep on the phone said she would look into it and hung up. I saved the doorbell footage of all 4 visits. I was building a file, piece by piece. That night my contractor called. He said someone had visited his office, asking questions about my project. The visitor claimed to be from the city building department, but when my contractor asked for credentials, the person left without showing ID. My contractor was spooked. He said he would finish the job, but if the HOA kept harassing him, he might walk. I begged him to stay. He said he would think about it. I was running out of time. My employer was watching my attendance, and I had already burned a sick day and a personal day dealing with the HOA. One more late arrival, and I was done. The fence was half finished, the contractor was on edge, and Karen was escalating faster than I could respond. I needed help. That is when I met Marcus. He was the neighborhood security guard supervisor, a guy who patrolled the development and handled gate access. I had seen him around, always polite, always professional. One evening, I was standing in my yard, staring at the post holes and trying to figure out my next move, when he pulled up in his patrol cart. He asked if I was okay. I gave him the short version. He nodded, said he had heard about it, and told me Karen had a history. She had filed complaints against 3 other homeowners in the past year, all related to exterior modifications. 2 had paid fines to make her go away. 1 had fought and lost. Marcus said he was tired of her demands. She called security for everything: dogs off leash, kids on bikes, cars parked 5 minutes past guest limits. He said if I needed a witness or documentation, he would help. Marcus became my ally. He gave me copies of incident reports Karen had filed, showing a pattern of complaints that escalated when homeowners pushed back. He told me about a vendor Karen favored, a landscaping company that got every HOA contract despite higher bids. He said the board president Gerald was getting pressure from other homeowners to rein her in, but no one wanted to challenge her directly. Marcus said I might be the one to finally force the issue, if I could prove she was abusing her authority. I had an idea. I asked Marcus if security kept logs of property visits. He said they did. I asked if he could pull the logs for my address over the past month. He said he could, but it would take a day or 2. I thanked him and went inside to review my own footage. I was looking for something specific. A mistake. A contradiction. Proof that Karen had lied. And I found it. The doorbell footage from the day Karen measured my yard showed something I had missed the first time. After she finished measuring, she walked to the front of my house and placed a yellow violation notice on my door. The timestamp was 2014 p.m. But the violation notice the HOA mailed to me was dated 3 days earlier, claiming it had been hand-delivered on that date. Karen had backdated the notice. She had created a paper trail to make it look like I had ignored warnings, when in reality, she had delivered the notice after the work had already started. I had her. I spent the next 2 days building my case. I compiled the doorbell footage, the vendor visit logs Marcus provided, the group chat screenshots, the certified letter with the backdated hearing notice, and the recorded plat showing my property line was accurate. I also requested a copy of the HOA's vendor contracts through a formal records request. The management company tried to stall, but I cited the state statute that required disclosure within 10 business days. They sent the contracts. One of them was with the landscaping company Marcus mentioned. The contract was a no-bid agreement, renewed annually without competitive review. The owner of the company was listed as a consultant on 3 other HOA committees. It smelled like favoritism. I was not a lawyer, but I knew enough to recognize a pattern. Karen was not just enforcing rules. She was protecting a system that benefited her and her allies. And I was about to blow it wide open. The second set piece happened on a Tuesday morning. I was in my yard, watching my contractor set the first new fence panel, when Karen appeared with her tape measure. She did not say hello. She walked straight to the panel, extended the tape measure vertically, and started yelling. "This is 6 feet 2 inches. You are over the limit." I told her the limit was 6 feet and the panel was 6 feet. She said she was measuring from the ground to the top of the post cap. I told her the covenant specified panel height, not post cap height. She ignored me, pulled out her phone, and started recording. She narrated into the camera, describing the violation in detail, waving her laminated rule card for emphasis. My contractor stopped working. He looked at me, then at Karen, then back at me. I could see him calculating whether this job was worth the headache. I needed to defuse the situation before he walked. I stepped forward and said calmly, "Karen, the panel is compliant. I have the measurements from the contractor and the permit. You are measuring incorrectly." She spun around, jabbing the tape measure toward me. "You do not build to my standard, you pay to my standard." I pulled out my phone and started recording. She noticed immediately and screamed, "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." I smiled. "That is interesting," I said, "because your minutes are about to become evidence." She froze. For a moment, I saw confusion flicker across her face, then anger, then something close to panic. She demanded to know what I meant. I told her I had footage of her backdating the violation notice, vendor logs showing harassment, and contracts proving favoritism. I told her I was filing a formal complaint with the board and copying the management company, and if she continued to interfere with my project, I would file a lawsuit for harassment and tortious interference. I was bluffing about the lawsuit. I did not have the money for that. But Karen did not know that. She stammered, tried to recover, and finally said, "This is not over." She walked away, leaving her tape measure on the ground. My contractor picked it up, handed it to me, and said, "That was the craziest thing I have ever seen." If you are enjoying this story and want to see what happens next, make sure to like and subscribe so you do not miss the wild ending. The twist came 3 days later. I received an email from a neighbor I barely knew. A guy named Tom, who lived 2 streets over. He said he had heard about my fight with Karen and wanted to share something. He attached a spreadsheet. It was a leaked document, an internal HOA tracking sheet that listed homeowners flagged for enforcement. My address was highlighted in yellow with a note that said priority -ed board approval pending. There were 6 other addresses on the list. 2 had already been fined. The rest were listed as pending action. The spreadsheet included a column labeled Vendor Response, with names of the landscaping company and 2 other contractors who did work for the HOA. It was a target list. The HOA was coordinating with vendors to identify homeowners for enforcement. And Karen was running the operation. Tom said he got the spreadsheet from a board member who was uncomfortable with the process and leaked it anonymously. He told me to be careful, because Karen had allies on the board who would protect her. I forwarded the spreadsheet to Marcus, my attorney contact, and 3 other neighbors on the target list. Within hours, the neighborhood group chat exploded. People were demanding answers. The board president, Gerald, posted a statement saying the spreadsheet was unauthorized and under review. Karen posted a reply defending the enforcement process, claiming it was necessary to maintain property values. The replies to her post were brutal. Neighbors called her a tyrant, a bully, and worse. One person tagged the local news. Another suggested a recall election. The HOA was in crisis. I used the momentum. I drafted a formal complaint and submitted it to the board, copying the management company and every board member. I outlined the backdated notice, the vendor harassment, the selective enforcement, and the leaked spreadsheet. I attached my evidence, doorbell footage, vendor logs, group chat screenshots, and the contracts showing favoritism. I demanded an immediate investigation, a halt to all enforcement actions against me, and a refund of any fines issued under the same flawed process. I also requested a special meeting to address the board's oversight failures. The board scheduled the meeting for the following week. It was held at the clubhouse on a Thursday evening. The room was packed. 50 homeowners showed up, more than I had ever seen at an HOA meeting. Karen sat at the board table, stone-faced, her laminated rule card in front of her. Gerald sat at the head of the table, looking exhausted. The other board members looked nervous. Gerald opened the meeting by acknowledging the complaint and the leaked spreadsheet. He said the board took the allegations seriously and had launched an internal review. He said enforcement actions would be paused pending the review. Karen tried to interrupt, but Gerald cut her off. He said the board would hear from homeowners first. One by one, people stood up and shared their stories. A woman who had been fined for a mailbox 2 inches too tall. a man who had been threatened with a lien for painting his front door the wrong shade of white. Another man who said Karen had sent vendors to his house without notice, just like she had done to me. Each story added weight. Each story built the case that Karen was not enforcing rules, she was abusing power. When it was my turn, I walked to the front and connected my laptop to the projector. I played the doorbell footage of Karen placing the backdated notice. I showed the vendor logs. I showed the spreadsheet with my address highlighted. I ended with the contracts proving vendor favoritism. The room was silent. I looked at Karen. She was staring at the table, her jaw clenched. I said, "This is not about offense. This is about a board member who has turned enforcement into a personal vendetta, and a system that allows it to happen." Gerald thanked me and said the board would deliberate in closed session. The meeting was adjourned. People came up to me afterward, shaking my hand, thanking me for speaking up. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You did good." But I knew the fight was not over. Karen still had allies. The board could still vote to sweep it under the rug. I needed one more push. The final showdown happened 2 weeks later at a courthouse hallway. The HOA had scheduled a hearing to address a lien they had placed on my property for unpaid fines. I had not paid the fines because I disputed them, and the HOA was trying to force payment through legal action. I hired the attorney I had consulted earlier, scraping together the retainer by borrowing from family. He told me the hearing would be short, but if I had any final evidence, now was the time. I had been holding a trump card. I had not revealed it because I wanted to make sure it would have maximum impact. I let Karen talk, because every word was helping me. The hearing was in a small conference room. A neutral mediator sat at the head of the table. My attorney and I sat on one side. Karen Gerald and the HOA's attorney sat on the other. Karen opened by presenting her case. She claimed I had violated multiple covenants, ignored warnings, and refused to cooperate with inspections. She presented her binder, her photos, her measurements. She was confident, almost smug. When it was my turn, my attorney asked the mediator for permission to submit a final piece of evidence. He handed over a bound report. It was a third-party inspection report, conducted by a licensed surveyor and code compliance specialist I had hired after the meeting. The report confirmed that my fence was compliant with city codes, HOA covenants, and the recorded plat. It also noted that the HOA's claims of setback violations and height violations were based on incorrect measurements and a misreading of the covenant. The report concluded that no violation existed. Karen started to argue, but the mediator cut her off. He read the report aloud, highlighting the key findings. He then asked Karen to explain how she had arrived at her measurements. She fumbled, citing her tape measure and her laminated rule card. The mediator asked if she had used professional equipment. She said no. He asked if she had verified her findings with a surveyor. She said it was not necessary. He said the report in front of him suggested otherwise. Then I played my final move. I used the report to trigger an internal audit. I asked the mediator to recommend that the HOA board conduct a full audit of all enforcement actions Karen had overseen in the past year, including vendor relationships and fee structures. My attorney added that the audit should include a review of the spreadsheet and the no-bid contracts. The mediator agreed to include the recommendation in his decision. Karen's face went pale. She looked at Gerald. He looked away. The mediator ruled in my favor. He found the HOA's claims unfounded and ordered the lien removed. He also recommended mediation with a neutral third party to address the broader enforcement issues. He cited the evidence I had provided as proof of procedural failures and potential conflicts of interest. The HOA's attorney tried to object, but the mediator shut him down. The decision was final. We walked out into the courthouse hallway. Karen followed, flanked by Gerald. She tried to stop me, demanding to know who had given me the spreadsheet. I told her it did not matter. She said I had ruined her reputation. I told her she had done that herself. She started to yell, but a couple walking by stopped to watch, and she fell silent. She turned and walked away, her gray blazer damp from the drizzle outside, her laminated rule card crumpled in her hand. The board held an emergency meeting the following week. Marcus told me it was standing room only again. The mediator's recommendation had triggered a firestorm. Neighbors demanded accountability. The audit I had requested revealed a pattern of vendor favoritism, with the landscaping company receiving contracts without competitive bids and 2 board members having financial ties to the company. The audit also found that Karen had issued backdated notices in 3 other cases, not just mine. The board voted to remove Karen from her vice president position. They also voted to refund all fines issued under the flawed enforcement process, including mine. The landscaping company lost its contract. 2 board members resigned. Gerald announced he would not seek re-election. Karen tried one last move. She filed a counter-complaint, claiming I had defamed her in the group chat and at the meeting. Her complaint was reviewed by the management company and dismissed within a week. The evidence was too strong. The doorbell footage, the vendor logs, the spreadsheet, the inspection report, all of it pointed to her as the aggressor. Her complaint was ruled unfounded, with evidence cited. The funny karma moment came 2 weeks later. Karen had insisted throughout the dispute that my fence was an easement issue. She claimed the property line I was using encroached on a utility easement and that the recorded plat was wrong. She demanded the HOA hire a surveyor to prove it. The board agreed, mostly to shut her up. The surveyor came out, reviewed the plat, measured the property, and issued a report. The easement was exactly where the recorded plat said it was. My fence was not even close to it. The recorded plat disproved her claim completely. Karen had been wrong the entire time, and the survey she demanded was the final proof. A budget review triggered by the audit revealed that Karen had approved vendor invoices without board votes, directed contracts to companies she had personal relationships with, and failed to disclose conflicts of interest. The review found vendor favoritism across multiple contracts, not just landscaping. The HOA hired a new management company to clean up the mess. My fence was finished a month later. The contractor returned, relieved that the harassment had stopped, and completed the work without incident. The new panels were exactly 6 feet tall, set back exactly where the permit specified, and compliant with every rule Karen had tried to twist. I stood in my yard the day it was done, looking at the clean lines and solid posts, and felt something close to peace. Marcus stopped by that evening in his patrol cart. He said the neighborhood felt different. Quieter. Less tense. He said people were talking about running for the board, about changing the rules, about making sure what happened to me never happened to anyone else. He said I had started something. I told him I just wanted to build a fence. He laughed and said sometimes that is all it takes. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal. The group chat calmed down. The board installed new oversight procedures. Karen stopped showing up to meetings. I heard from Tom that she had put her house on the market. Marcus said she had resigned from all HOA committees. I kept my job. My supervisor never said anything about the days I missed, but I made sure to clock in early every shift for the next 3 months. My probation ended, and I moved into a permanent position. The fence held through the winter, solid and square, exactly the way it was supposed to be. One evening, I was sitting on my back deck, looking at the fence line, when I noticed a couple on a neighbor's porch a few houses down. They were watching something in the distance, holding drinks, leaning on the railing like they were watching a show. I realized they had been there during some of the confrontations, watching Karen yell, watching the tape measure ambush, watching the chaos unfold. I waved. They waved back. One of them raised a glass in a toast. I laughed and went inside. The HOA sent a formal apology letter 6 weeks after the mediator's ruling. It was signed by Gerald and the new board president, a woman named Sandra, who had run on a platform of transparency and accountability. The letter acknowledged the procedural failures, the selective enforcement, and the vendor favoritism. It apologized for the stress and inconvenience I had endured. It confirmed that my fines had been refunded in full and that no further action would be taken regarding my fence. It was the closest thing to vindication I was going to get. I kept copies of everything: the doorbell footage, the vendor logs, the spreadsheet, the inspection report, the mediator's ruling, the apology letter. I stored them in a fireproof box in my closet, just in case. I did not think I would need them again, but I had learned my lesson. Documentation wins. Evidence wins. Patience wins. The Foxglove Falls Design Review Association still exists. The rules are still there, micromanaging fence styles and mailbox heights and paint colors. But the culture changed. The new board installed term limits, required competitive bids for all vendor contracts, and created an appeals process for enforcement actions. They published the covenant amendments in a quarterly newsletter and required homeowner votes for major changes. It was not perfect, but it was better. Karen never came back. I saw her once, a few months later, loading boxes into a moving truck. She did not look at me. I did not say anything. There was nothing left to say. My fence still stands, solid and square, exactly 6 feet tall, exactly where the permit said it should be. Every time I walk past it, I think about the tape measure ambush, the hearing, the mediator's ruling, the refund checks that went out to every homeowner hit in the enforcement wave. I think about Karen's face when the mediator read the inspection report. I think about the leaked spreadsheet and the budget review and the new board members who ran on transparency. I think about the fact that sometimes you do not need a lawyer or a lot of money to win. You just need evidence, patience, and the willingness to stand your ground when someone tries to bully you off your own property. Keep your sanity, and I will catch you next time.